Good morning. Thank you, Luis. Yes, so we are focusing on the artist Roberto Márquez. He was, as Luis mentioned, he is originally from Mexico, a painter. He was born in Mexico City and spent his later childhood in Guadalajara. He first came to America at age 15 to work in the fields in California, but he was sent back to Mexico after about 4 months. He returned and eventually found stable employment working construction in the Washington, D.C. area. So, again, as Luis mentioned, he was in D.C., Arizona, California. He was kind of all over in the beginning. And then he eventually found, in 1995, he moved with his family to Dallas, obtained citizenship, and actually established a real estate business, buying houses and fixing them up. About 5 years ago or so, he decided that his finances were secure enough that he could retire early and give his artistic side and his artistic career a chance to flourish. He'd been painting for decades by then, but now would have the time to really focus and hone his craft. So here are some of his early works. We can see they're a little bit more sketch-like with more muted colors. But as he really develops his style, we'll notice that his pieces get more vibrant and more nuanced. He read books on Picasso and practiced for his new vocation by obsessively reproducing Guernica, Picasso's famous canvas depicting a fascist bombardment during the Spanish Civil War. By now, I can almost blindfold myself and paint Guernica, Márquez says. And we could see similar themes and styles to Picasso in some of these works. Again, these pieces are particularly reminiscent of Picasso's blue period with a similar color palette and tone. And the painting on the right specifically reminds me of Picasso's guitar player. He's known for his fantastical pieces, often including animals and nature, as we can see here. The piece on the left is a reinterpretation of the history of Troy and the Trojan horse. And on the left is Mapa de Mexico, where we can see the outline of the Mexican map behind the boy and the tree. Márquez plays around with form, pattern, color, and size in these pieces. And we can see how creative his work is, with both the sculpture on the left and the kind of surrealist piece that was painted on cloth on the right. In the early 2000s, he worked a lot with heads and faces. When he retired and focused on painting, he sought advice on how to become a professional artist. And Márquez was told that he would need to have a story. Because he's an extremely private person about his personal life, he took inspiration from the other artists that he studied. And so these pieces remind me of the surrealism of Frida Kahlo. Recently, Márquez has garnered much more attention and praise and has reached a larger audience with his in-person work that he creates to honor places of tragedies. This picture here is of him in his signature black cowboy hat at the Allen Outlets, the site of a mass shooting killing 8 people this year. His work typically responds to the events at hand, honoring victims and decrying injustice. Here he paints the names of the victims on wooden crosses. And as a rule, he abandons the pieces at the site of the memorial, simply packing up and moving on to the next event. And sadly, there always seems to be a next event. Like millions of people across the globe, Roberto Márquez watched television coverage of the attack on Ukraine. It made an impact on him, and so Márquez made his way to Poland and then to Kiev. Once the Russians retreated from their positions around the city in late March, he set up a makeshift open-air studio in the shadow of the shattered bridge at Irpin. With the blessing of Ukrainian officials, he went to work there on a pair of large canvases. They depict a pair of signature early events of the war in Ukraine, the dramatic river crossing in Irpin, and the discovery of what Ukrainian officials called mass murder and war crimes in nearby Bucha and other towns that Russians had occupied. As I mentioned before, he was very inspired by Picasso and particularly Guernica. He painted these canvases in that similar style of the piece with the sharp lines and cubist forms to emulate not only the visual style, but also what the piece was saying about the destruction of war and bombing. Márquez has had a long career of beautifully creative paintings but has received much more media attention in recent years for his art activism. When he began painting as his career, he didn't know what his story and point of view was. But through his public in-person works, he's able to help heal communities that are suffering with the power of art. Thank you.